All right, boys and girls, for today's video, we got the final Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 raid and dungeon tier list. Now, if you haven't seen my previous tier list video I posted not too long ago, we ranked every expansion in Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, and today we're doing the raids and dungeons. Now, my reasons for wanting to make these tier list videos were, one, I always wanted to make my own tier list regarding these topics. And two, now with the game kind of being officially over, especially with the last round of layoffs we just had, and knowing that Destiny as a franchise might be kind of cooked and we might not get anything new, I thought it was the perfect time to look back and rank all the best content we've gotten throughout Destiny. Now, a few caveats for this video. Number one, when it comes to Leviathan, Eater of Worlds, Spire of Stars, Scourge of the Past, and Crown of Sorrows, I've only ever done the original raids once, and not even on my account. Back during that time, I was pretty busy and I didn't own Destiny 2 during that lifespan, but my buddy did. So when I'd hang out at his house, I was able to play him on his account, and that's kind of how I got my feel for him. But I've never really done them on my account, and I only have like 1 or 2 clears per raid. So when I get to those raids for the rankings, just take them with a grain of salt, and knowing that I don't have that much time with them, and unfortunately they're not in the game anymore, so I can't go back and play them and try to get a better understanding of where I would rank them. Also, another thing to add, Pantheon 1 and 2 are going to be in this ranking as well, but the Ride of the 9 dungeons will not be. My main reason for that is the Ride of the 9 dungeons didn't really change a whole lot from the way you actually interacted with them. The loot was just kind of okay as well, and I didn't think they warranted another slot to be ranked. But when I do get to the dungeons that the Ride of the 9 did remix, I will give a little tidbit on where I would rank the Ride of the 9 version. But with that said, let's get this tier list going. We are going to be starting with Destiny 1 Vault of Glass, the very first raid to ever grace Destiny and to ever grace this planet, Destiny 1's Vault of Glass. This is going to be a tricky one for me to place because nostalgia reasons, I really like it. Like, Vault of Glass is one of my more favorite raids to run, even though it is kind of a glorified strike, especially in D1. And when I'm looking at like all the other raids that we have like down here, in comparison, yeah, Vault of Glass really does not stack up. But what does Vault of Glass bring to the table? Well, first off, I think the visuals of Vault of Glass are phenomenal, especially the end fight room with Atheon. That little pyramid glass sculpture they got in the background, that thing is fantastic to lay your eyes upon. The loot also is incredibly solid. Some of my most favorite weapons of all time came from this raid, like Fatebringer, Hezen's Vengeance, and then you got the exotic too with Vex Mythoclast, which is one of my more favorite personal exotics. What really brings this raid down is obviously it's very outdated. It's incredibly outdated. So while I do want to put it up here, I'm debating between B and C, and the only reason I put it in B is because of that nostalgia factor. But this is what I'm gonna do. If I was taking the loot out of it, it'd be C, but when you incorporate the loot and you have Fatebringer, Vision of Confluence, Hezen's Vengeance, Vex Mythoclast, when you really think about the Vault of Glass weapons, they're all insanely good. So I think I'm gonna put it in B tier. All right, next up, we got probably one of the most infamous raids in Destiny history, Crota's End. And now I say it's one of the most infamous raids in Destiny history purely because it was the first raid to ever be soloed. And I remember being a kid, and when I would go on YouTube, I'd see videos of the solo raider. It was blowing up. It was everywhere. Everyone was trying to solo Crota, and the fact that you could even do it was like a shock to everyone, because back in D1, the thought of doing a raid without even 6 people was kind of crazy, and the fact that someone was able to solo Crota's End was also insane. However, Crota's End in D1, the D1 specific version, was not good. I love it personally. I do love it. The aesthetics of this raid were phenomenal. The lore implications this raid brings is also awesome because it sets up King's Fall with Oryx and the Taken King. But if we're talking purely about the raid, it'd probably be down here in terms of mechanics, because while the raid is really fun to run, the fact that you can solo it and it is kind of like a glorified strike, like if you go back and you play Destiny 1 right now, even if you've never played it before and you're a Destiny 2 guy, if you went back and played Crota's End in D1, you would be shocked at how easy it is. Like, it is insanely easy. It doesn't even feel like a raid, and that's why it's down here for me. But when you talk about the loot, for example, like you got Black Hammer, which for all my D1 vets out there, you know how insane Black Hammer was. Hunger of Crota, which was one of my favorite rocket launchers to run back in the day. You got the Word of Crota, Sword Breaker, Fang of Erie. Like, you have a lot of really cool weapons. Necrochasm too. While in D1 it was kind of a joke, at least it looked really cool, you know. Also, another thing I forgot to mention, Glowhoo came from this raid and Shatterwhite came from Vault of Glass, which both amazing shaders. But when you talk about the loot really kicks this sucker up. So I'm not going to put it in F, but I am going to put it in D just because it really doesn't even feel like a raid. But here we go. Next one, King's Fall, the original King's Fall in D1. The original King's Fall is phenomenal. It really pushed the narrative, especially in D1 where we only had 4 raids. It was the first raid to really push the narrative of what a raid could look like or could be. It was the longest raid out of the 3 that we had gotten so far. Every encounter was really well crafted and really well done and really thought out. The lore implications too, with it being Oryx, in my opinion, the best expansion being that of the Taken King, really just put a bow on it. And then when we get to the loot of this raid was phenomenal. You know, you got guns like Zali's Bane, Smiter Moraine, which Smiter Moraine back in D1 was insane in PvE. You got Doom and Chelchis. You have my favorite sniper of all time, Defiance of Yasmin. Quillam's Terminus is also a really cool machine gun that I used a lot in D1, but I didn't really use that much in D2. And then Touch of Malice being this raid's exotic. This raid is phenomenal. What this raid kind of lacks, and what I actually think D2's version really like kicks up, is the fight against Oryx. Everything leading up to Oryx is phenomenal, but the fight against Oryx, you don't actually really damage him yourself. You kind of just set off traps and bombs, and that's what kills him, which that really annoyed me back in the day because it didn't feel like you were the one killing Oryx. It more just felt like you were watching Oryx die to traps you set out, which, I mean, in a way, I guess you can feel like you're killing him, but to me, I wanted to feel like I was actually putting the work in with my fire team to bring the Taken King down. So for me, it's an A tier, and it would be an S tier, but there are some things that the D2 version fixes that makes the D2 version way better, in my opinion, at least. So for that reason, I gotta put Destiny 1's King's Fall in A. All right, next one we got the last Destiny 1 raid, Wrath of the Machine. Now, Wrath of the Machine, the only raid never to get put into D2 from D1. This raid, I'm not even gonna really waste anybody's time here. It's going in S tier. While I don't think it is my personal favorite raid, and you'll see later on once we get kind of lower into the list what raids I like more, it is one of the best raids we have ever gotten, period. The only thing that in my mind that really drags it down a bit was the loot. And I'm not talking about the armor or Outbreak Perfected, because both of those, the armor sets and Outbreak Perfected, phenomenal. Armor set looked incredible. Outbreak Perfected is one of my favorite exotics of all time, but the just standard loot, even if it was good, a lot of the loot pool, it just kind of looked like foundry guns, like rare guns, blue guns you would just find, but in a legendary skin. And I didn't really get too attached to the loot pool when it came to Wrath of the Machine, and I always thought that was kind of a letdown, but the mechanics of this raid are phenomenal. Like, this is one of the funnest raids to run because it really strikes that perfect balance of not being overly complicated and hard, but not just being piss easy either. And it really just provides, in my opinion, the perfect raid experience where you have really well thought out, crafted mechanics, but it's not too overwhelming that anyone can kind of enjoy it. So that's an easy S tier for me. I think Wrath of the Machine is incredible, and I'm really sad we're never going to see it in Destiny 2. But now we get to Destiny 2, and like I said at the top of this video, I don't have too much time with a lot of the early raids of Destiny 2, but I'm gonna do my best to rank them nonetheless. We got Leviathan. Leviathan is an incredible raid. I personally loved that it felt like you were on a game show, and Couch is just watching you and kind of commentating on it. One of my favorite raid encounters ever comes from this raid, and it was the Gauntlet. I don't know what it was, but the Gauntlet was so fun to me when I was younger. This raid had a lot of really good encounters. I thought Callus is really fun. I thought the Pleasure Gardens was also pretty interesting and a really cool encounter. The rest of the encounters is kind of like in my opinion, at least from when I did it. But overall, on an encounter basis, I really did enjoy Leviathans. Plus the loot from this raid, also phenomenal. You know, you got guns like Midnight Coup, Alone as a God, Sins of the Past. Like a lot of really cool weapons came from this raid, as well as Legend of Avarice, which is a really fun exotic and an exotic I still use to this day. Plus the armor sets, also phenomenal. Like on a pure aesthetic level, from the raid to the armor to the weapons, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. Now, if we're comparing the launch of D1 and D2 and we're comparing the raids only, it's definitely better than Vault of Glass. I wouldn't put it in B tier. I would put it in A tier. I don't think it's quite an S, and I don't think it quite beats out King's Fall, but I like it right behind Destiny 1 King's Fall. Like I said, when I played it, the few times I did, I always really enjoyed playing it. And now we got the first raid later, Eater of Worlds. This, okay. I'm leaning towards F or bottom of D. And the reason it's not even going straight to F is because I actually do think Argos, the final encounter, is actually really fun, even if it is really brain dead and easy. I did really enjoy that encounter at least, but everything leading up to this is basically a strike. It's not a raid at all. Crota's End in Destiny 1 is far more of a raid than Eater of Worlds is. Now, to its credit, it was the first raid layer, so it wasn't trying to be like a full-blown raid, but I mean, it didn't even have an exotic weapon that came with Eater of Worlds. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it even had armor sets, and I think it only had like 1 or 2 legendary weapons that dropped from it, so there's really no reason to ever run it. But I think it is our first F tier. But even though, again, it fits into that Leviathan aesthetic, and I really do like that aesthetic, it just did not really have too much going for it. The only saving grace from this raid was Argos, like I said, but easy F tier. It's really not that good. All right, next one we got is the second Destiny 2 raid layer, Spire of Stars. Now, I was fortunate enough to be one of the very few that got to do this raid, because I know a lot of people even back then did not do it because it was very difficult, especially the day one. I've heard a lot of the day one guys say that this was one of the hardest day ones they've ever had to compete in, mainly that being the final encounter, I think. But let's try to rank it, because I only did it a handful of times, and I think for me, I would put it in D tier, because it is definitely better than Eater of Worlds. I don't think it's better than Crota's End, because Crota's End definitely does feel like more of a completed raid. Like I said, Crota's End has a complete weapon set, it has an armor set, it has an exotic, whereas Spire of Stars, I think, is like Eater Worlds, where it only has like 1 or 2 weapons from it, no exotic. I think Spire of Stars does have an armor set though, which I do remember kind of being cool. It was like very gold and shiny and stuff. Now again, like Eater Worlds, it only had like 3 encounters, the first 2 being kind of a snooze. However, what I do remember from Spire of Stars is that final fight was actually really fun. Like being launched into space and having to give callouts of the ships that need to be shot was so fun to me. I really enjoy the final encounter of Spire of Stars, and I really am sad that it didn't get put into Pantheon 2.0, because it was actually really fun, and I wish I could play it again, because when I did play it for the first time way back in the day, I thought it was so freaking fun. But regardless of how fun or how great that encounter is, one encounter does not change everything else that holds it back. And while I would say like the final encounter of Spire of Stars is better than anything in Crota's End, I would take the whole complete package of Crota's End over Spire of Stars any day. But again, it's not worse than Eater of Worlds. Bottom of D tier, I think, is a fair listing for it. But I do just want to make it known, final encounter, I believe it was called Celestial Observatory. Could be wrong on that. Like I said, long time ago. But that encounter was gas as fuck. But we got a big boy coming up next. We got Last Wish, Destiny 2 Forsaken, Last Wish. This is going to be another really easy one for me. It's going in S tier. I actually would put it below Wrath of the Machine. I do enjoy Wrath of the Machine more, but Last Wish, when it dropped, was phenomenal. Even if the day one was kind of controversial of how much you had to grind for it, but top to bottom, every encounter in this raid was incredible. This was the King's Fall of Destiny 2, where it was probably the longest raid that's been put into Destiny 2 in terms of encounters, and every encounter being super well crafted and very well thought out. And just playing the raid is really fun. I think the one thing that really trips people up is doing Vault, but regardless of that fact, Shirochi is an incredible encounter. I love how fast paced and just nonstop go it is. Also, shout out my queen Shirochi for getting all my catalysts. This one goes out to you. But also Riven, doing Riven legit, not cheesing, even though I do the cheese nowadays. Doing Riven legit is one of the funnest encounters you can possibly do. Plus, I thought it was so cool having a secret final encounter after the final boss, because Queen's Walk is super fun. There's something about Queen's Walk where if you're being teleported inside and your homie is the last one outside and you're just depending on him to get that ball to the finish line and you can't see what he's doing, the comms you would have with your boys is some of the funniest gaming moments I've ever had, dude. Because you hear just one like, uh-oh, and everyone starts screaming. It was so fun. If we're talking aesthetic, obviously it's a dreaming city. Aesthetic wise, it's phenomenal. The armor set, I don't personally love the way it looks, but there are some cool pieces from it. The loot, especially the loot nowadays after they refreshed it, phenomenal. Nation of Beasts, Apex Predator, the Supremacy, that fusion rifle, I'm blanking on the name, Techian's Force or something like that. The loot from Last Wish is all just phenomenal. The bow is really good too. 1K, especially now after June 9th, 1K is cooking, and I always love that exotic. I always thought it was really cool looking and super fun to use. Plus, just the level of detail put into that raid, like having a wish wall where you can just skip to whatever encounter you want to go to, is something that I wish they would have done for every raid, because that makes target farming or just wanting to do specific encounters in this raid so fun, so much less of a way less of a hassle. And being able to like farm keys, so when you complete the raid, it's not just one drop. You can open as many chests as you want, depending on how many keys you got, and you get to pick what chest you want to get. So everyone's waiting in anticipation to see if you pick the lucky chest that has 1K. Like, I can't say enough good things about Last Wish. It is a phenomenal raid. I would put it below Wrath of the Machine though, but not by much. It is a very close race between those two, but no question in my mind, Last Wish is going in S tier. Now we got the very first dungeon ever put into Destiny 2, Shattered Throne. Shattered Throne is a tricky one for me to place because I like the aesthetic, but the aesthetic is just the exact same throughout the entire dungeon, and it can get pretty old pretty quickly. The encounters are very basic, but that's to be expected with this being their very first crack at dungeons. And I mean, back in the day, there really wasn't much reason to run it, because correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the weapons that dropped from here were just the same weapons that came from the Blind Well in the Dreaming City. And the only really unique thing from this was the dungeon exotic Wish Ender, which is a really solid bow. And the final note I have with this, it would be the solo flawless experience. The solo flawless experience on this was kind of a joke. Not back in the day though. Back in the day, if you try to solo flawless it back then, it was a lot more of a challenge. Today though, if you try to solo flawless it, it's so easy. Like if you play Hunter, one golden gun shot with Celestial Nighthawk insta kills every boss in this dungeon, which there's only 2, but even with that, that's insane. The first encounter of this, where you have to hunt down all those symbols, is really long and really annoying. I don't think it's as annoying as a lot of other people do, especially once you kind of get where every location is. But like, I'm leaning towards C, but there's something in me that's like, you can't put it C. I mean, it was the very first dungeon. It started the whole dungeon thing. And the thing I'm really struggling with is I think I'm looking at it through today's lens, which today's lens, it's not that great and it would be a C tier. But if I remove myself from that bias and I look at it for what it is and when it came out, I would say it's behind Vault of Glass and D1, but it's in bottom of B tier, because I still do like running that dungeon and it is a very fun dungeon to run, even if it is insanely basic and not my personal favorite. I think for it being the very first crack they had at it, you got to give it respect, put it bottom of B. Now we get to Scourge of the Past. Now, out of the raids that I said I didn't have a lot of time with, this is probably the one I did the least. I think I only did one clear of this on my friend's account, and I never really did it again. And from what I remember of this raid, I thought it was really cool. They were in the last city because that was a location we'd never really been before. And I thought the map mechanic was also pretty cool, really well thought out. But I ultimately did think it was kind of basic up until you got to the final encounter, which that final encounter is actually super fun. And I think if you never played Scourge of the Past, the final encounter is in Pantheon 2. You can go play that, and it is a really fun and well thought out encounter, and I do really enjoy that. The weapons from this raid, I don't fully remember being that crazy. I mean, threat level was pretty cool. Bellowing Giant was, I guess, kind of cool. The main thing from this raid was Anarchy, and especially back then was the meta. It was the Galahorn of D2. But again, this raid was kind of one of those more basic raids, not fully a raid layer basic, but on that side. And I think mainly because it came out with a season, it didn't come out with an expansion, so there wasn't that much put into it. But for what it is, really solid. Especially the sparrow part. We have to race with that flame chasing you. That part is awesome. Always on time as well. The fastest sparrow in the game up until they reworked how sparrows were. That also was amazing. That might have just put it in the B tier. I'm not gonna lie. But no, I gotta be honest with myself. I think it is a C tier raid. More towards the top of C. Maybe you can make an argument bottom of B, but I think Scourge of the Past for me is a C tier raid. It's middle of the pack. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's just right there, smack dab in the middle. I do know that a lot of my friends love this raid though, especially the ones that got to play it more, and they'd probably put it up, and I wouldn't have any qualms with that. Because again, I only got like one clear of this raid from start to finish. But from what I do remember, I did like it, just not that much to put it in that B to S territory. Now I'm just kind of looking at this, and it's kind of crazy that I put Shattered Throne above it. But you know what? Whatever. We're moving. Next one we got is Crown of Sorrows. Now this is in that Scourge of the Past where I only did it like 2 times back in the day. So again, take what I have to say about this with a grain of salt. But from what I do remember, I did like it. I just didn't think it was anything crazy. And the only thing I really enjoyed was the final encounter. I thought Galron, and I still to this day, because this is another one of those raids that's in Pantheon 2. Got to mention Argos is also in Pantheon 2, but this is another one of those raids that was Galron was put into Pantheon 2.0, so you can go replay that, and I think it actually holds up to today's standards. It's a really, really fun encounter. But when it came to the rest of the raid, I just thought it was kind of okay. I didn't think it was anything crazy, just okay. Again, I think this was a raid that came out with a season, so like Scourge of the Past, it didn't have that much put into it. But in terms of like the weapons and the armor and the aesthetic, all pretty solid. Like Teraba is an incredible SMG, and I was a nightmare in trials with it for a time there because I absolutely loved using it. When you get Ravenous Beast going, especially in PvP, you can fry with it. It is so much fun. The rest of the weapons, it's kind of forgettable in my opinion, at least. The armor sets looked really cool. To be fair, the armor sets did look really cool. And the overall aesthetic of this raid is another thing where I thought it was cool, and it was also kind of not. There was parts of this raid that looked really basic or kind of rushed, and then there's other parts like the final encounter with Galron that is just immaculate to look at. Now for me, I don't think it's really hard for me where I'm going to place this. I think it is going to go in C tier. What I'm debating is if it's above Scourge or below Scourge, and I think for me there's more to Scourge that I like than there is Crown of Sorrows. So I think for me, I gotta put Crown of Sorrows in behind Scourge of the Past, even though I do like Crown of Sorrows. But again, it's kind of in that same, I don't love it, I don't hate it, it's just kind of mid to me, even though there are some really good aspects from it. And now we got a very, very controversial raid, Garden of Salvation. Now I know the broader community of Destiny 2 is going to want me to put this straight in F as the worst raid ever made. I, however, am not going to do that, because while I don't love this raid, I don't mind this raid. I think Goss gets hated on way too much. From a pure aesthetic standpoint, this raid is one of the most beautiful raids I've ever seen in my life. When it comes to the weapons of Goss, I really like the weapons of Goss too, especially after the most recent rework. Zealot's Reward is one of the best fusion rifles in the game, in my opinion, in both PvE and PvP. Ancient Gospel is probably my most used hand cannon in the energy slot, which I know might sound kind of crazy, but I'm telling you guys, if you have a crafted roll of that, go put explosive payload with destabilizing rounds. That thing just kicks ass. Prophet of Doom is a really good shotgun, especially in PvP. Reckless Oracle, a really good Void auto. Like, there's so many good weapons from this raid. The armor aesthetic, while I think it's a letdown that some parts of it can't be shaded with a shader, it still looks really cool, and you can make some really cool looking armor sets with it. Now, where this raid does have its drawbacks, and I will be the first to admit, is the mechanics. That stupid ass tether mechanic pisses me off, dude, with how inconsistent it can feel sometimes. And I will say some of the encounters, like Defend the Spire, can just be a really long snooze fest. But honestly, the other encounters, I don't mind. Like, of course, I don't like the tether mechanic. I don't think anyone really does, especially with how buggy it is. But the very first encounter where you have like two teams running at the same time, you gotta pick up his spit, run with him, get to the very end. It is stupid easy and very basic, but it's not, I don't think it's anything too annoying, and I actually do like running it. Gambit mechanics in this raid also I don't love, but I did always like that Consecrated Mine. Everyone kind of had a role you could play. Like, there wasn't, at least when I ran it with my people, we never really had set ad clears and then people had set jobs. It was kind of like chaos mode when it came to Consecrated Mine. Like, we would always have someone doing the eyes, but we just kind of have whoever killed the Minotaur would go dunk and defend. And I like that you had to move with the boss during damage. It wasn't just stay in one place and just shoot boss. It was, he's going to back up, he's going to wall you off, you have to move with him. I did really enjoy that. The final encounter as well, while it is very Gambit heavy, and it is realistically, it's very basic. You just shoot off pieces of his armor, go to that side, pick up motes, come back, dunk, damage. Like, it is really basic and easy, but it's a basic and easy I don't mind doing, because you can kind of just turn your brain off and just kind of relax and fight the boss. Now, what I will never say is, I will never say it is a upper echelon raid. I will never say that, but being the worst raid ever, I don't think so. And where I would personally put it is middle of C, in between Crown and Scourge. I think Scourge is better. I don't think Crown is better, and I like where I have that ranked right there. Another thing I forgot to mention too, Divinity is from this raid, and it is a quest line too, so it can be a guaranteed drop for everyone, and Divinity is a really cool gun. So now we got the second dungeon ever released, Pit of Heresy. Now, I don't know how the community feels about this dungeon at all. A lot of the other raids and dungeons in this list, I do have somewhat of a idea of how the community feels, except for maybe a few. When it comes to Pit of Heresy, no clue how the community feels about this. For me though, you know what I'm saying? Like, this, I do not like this dungeon at all. I would probably put it ahead of Eater of Worlds, but I really do not like this dungeon at all. I think it is so boring. It is just not fun to run at all. I know today they updated the loot and the loot's not terrible, but I mean, back in the day, it was just moon armor and the Altar of Sorrow weapons. And if you look at the encounters and mechanics, there's only one boss fight, and it's the very final encounter. You have the opening to this dungeon just being the biggest snooze fest ever. You need to go find a sword bearer, kill him, take a sword, find the 3 symbols you need, go to those symbols, do the trials, and then you can progress. It's just so brain dead boring, and I just do not like it. The ball dunking totem encounter too is just another snooze fest where stand on plate, don't let it get angry, dunk balls from knights. Like, it's just so easy and brain dead. It's just so simplistic in a way I don't like. There's a way to do simplistic that I don't mind. I think Shattered Throne is a good example of that. Shattered Throne is also very simplistic, but it's done in a way I don't mind it. Whereas Pit of Heresy is the simplistic that just feels brain dead, and I just get so bored doing it. I just really do not like it, especially after you dunk the balls during that totem encounter, and then you have to run through a maze, find witches to kill so you can progress to the final encounter. Like, that little maze section, I don't know if I'm stupid, but that shit pisses me off, bro. Like, I hate running that, because there's times I can blitz through it like it's nothing, and there's other other times I'm stuck there for like 10 minutes. It's so annoying. And honestly, I would put it behind Eater of Worlds, but the only reason I have it above it is because technically Xenophage is from this dungeon, and Xenophage is a really cool gun, and Eater of Worlds does not even have an exotic. So that's the only reason it's above it in my mind. But I really do not like Pit of Heresy. I think it is so boring and just not fun to run at all. Aesthetic is cool though. I'll give it that. The aesthetic is pretty dope. All right, but now we got Prophecy. Now, Prophecy is one of my most favorite dungeons in Destiny 2. It is pretty simplistic. It is pretty easy, especially nowadays. And if you were to do it today, it'd probably take you only 15 minutes to complete it. But there's just something about Prophecy that I love. I don't know if it's the aesthetic of the dungeon, which, real quick, one of the most picturesque, perfect aesthetics they've ever made, especially the Ribbon Road. That location alone is phenomenal. And I don't know if it's like the armor, because the armor from this dungeon is really cool, and we actually got 2 sets from it. There's 2 different sets of this armor, one that drops from the final encounter and the other one drops from the other 2 encounters. And I don't even know if it's the weapons, because I actually really like the weapons, especially the updated loot pool. Prosecutor is one of my favorite auto rifles. Adjudicator is one of my favorite submachine guns. Judgment is one of my favorite hand cannons. Like, I genuinely really love Prophecy. I think it is such a well done dungeon. And when it comes to my drawbacks of this dungeon, I only have 2 of them. There's only 2 of them. One, it's the fact that this dungeon does not have an exotic, and 2, it is the middle encounter. That being, I don't know the technical term for it, but it's the one where you have to find Toland on the wall and then dunk the moats depending on what side he's on, which I wouldn't mind as much. But the fact that you have to do it 6 times and there's a chance it could go on the ceiling, which means you can't progress, which means you have to go on additional rotation because that technically doesn't count, really bothers me. And that is a snooze fest, and it takes for freaking ever. But those are my only 2 gripes with it. Everything else about this dungeon I absolutely love. If I was being completely biased here, it would be probably bottom of S. I'm not gonna do that though. I'm not gonna do that. I know that'd be crazy. I am going to put it bottom of A, because I genuinely do think it is a very high quality dungeon, especially something I forgot to talk about in Pit of Heresy, but the solo flawless for Prophecy is really fun. You get that cool sparrow, plus there's the bunny shell from this dungeon as well. There's just so much to love about Prophecy, and so I do think it is bottom of A. If we're talking about the Ride of the 9 version, I think the Ride of the 9 version is definitely better. The middle encounter, they've changed it, no longer goes on the ceiling, and they actually added a mini boss at the end of that encounter too. And the Ride of the 9 version, honestly, I'd probably just have it where it's at base. I'd probably have it bottom of A, but the Ride of the 9 version I do think is a little better than the base version. But Prophecy, I do like it bottom of A. But now we got Deepstone Crypt, the Beyond Light raid, and one that I personally really enjoy. Deepstone Crypt is that perfect raid for you just don't want anything too complex. You don't want to really think about anything. You just want really simplistic encounters that are done in a way that doesn't feel boring. And Deepstone Crypt is that perfect middle ground. There's not really an encounter from Deepstone Crypt I genuinely don't like. I think every encounter from this raid is phenomenal, especially the opening with the sparrows where you have to drive them all the way down the frozen mountain. I always really like that. Plus the aesthetic of this raid is phenomenal. I don't know what it is, but there's something about that Braid Tech aesthetic I just really like. Plus you got Deepstone Lullaby from this raid, which I don't know about your fire team, but anytime me and my boys, or honestly anytime I join any LFG, if we're doing Deepstone, everyone's like, shut the fuck up when you get to the spacewalk part, because we just want to listen to the music and just vibe out for a second. Generally such a fun raid. Atrax is a super fun encounter too, because it's just everyone brings burst DPS and you one phase the bitch, and I really enjoy that. I also just like the mechanics of this raid. I like the way scanner, operator, and suppressor work. I just like the way they intertwine and play together. And even though Taniks has been redone 1,000 times, something about it, man, brings you back brings you back to that D1 strike. Plus the loot from Deepstone, while I actually think the loot is kind of mid from Deepstone, a lot of my friends love it, especially Trusty. I got so many friends that love that stupid scout rifle for some reason, but the loot of Deepstone is kind of mid in my opinion. I just don't love the loot from Deepstone. Eyes of Tomorrow though is a super fun exotic, and I think is a very underrated exotic today. While it kind of can be annoying for damage rotation having to keep Argent Ordnance up, and I know for DPS DPS purposes to keep that buff up, it's not great. That bitch hits like a truck though if you have it. Like if you have Argent Ordnance procced and you shoot a boss and you land all volleys at that boss, it chunks, man. It does a ton of damage. Now for me, where I'm going to place this raid is somewhere in A, and I think I'm going to place it right above Prophecy. I think that's where I like it, because I think I would rather play Leviathan or King's Fall over it, but I still do like Deepstone a lot. And I think Deepstone just has more going for it than Prophecy does, which is hard for me to say, because again, I have, for whatever reason, I have this strange bias towards Prophecy that I just love that dungeon. But trying to be as unbiased as I can, I think it is in A tier right above Prophecy. But now we get to the very first reprisal raid in Destiny 2, the new and improved Vault of Glass. Now this one, like its counterpart, is also kind of a glorified strike, but actually has some fun raid stuff in there. And again, kind of like Prophecy, I have this bias towards Vault of Glass, and I just love that raid. I think Destiny 2 wise, Vault of Glass is my most played raid ever. When it comes to the loot pool, Fatebringer, phenomenal, probably my favorite legendary gun ever. Found Verdict, one of my most used PvP shotguns ever. Hezen's Vengeance, the best rocket in the game. Praetus Revenge, really solid sniper rifle if you want an alternative to Supremacy. Vision of Confluence, super underrated scout rifle, but again, it's a scout rifle, so who really cares? Plus you got Vex Mythoclast, which Vex is, again, like I said earlier, one of my all-time favorite exotics ever. But doing this raid today, it is kind of boring, especially with all the cheeses you can do, and a lot of this raid is just kind of clearing ads. There's not really too much to do mechanics wise up until you get to oracles, which the oracles they do in Destiny 2's version is a lot better, where you have to kill them in the order they spawn, not just shoot them when they spawn. Plus gatekeepers is actually super fun in Destiny 2 if you do it legit and don't cheese it on left side. Like the whole swapping the shield back and forth, having people go in and out, is actually really fun if you do it legit. The problem is no one ever does that, and I'm guilty of that too. I never do that. I always push the dude off in left side by myself. But again, like it takes what Vault of Glass had and it makes it better, and I really do love running this raid. For some reason, I just never get tired of running Vault of Glass, and I think for me, it's going in A tier. I would put it above Prophecy. What I'm debating now is if it's below Deepstone or above it. Ooh, okay. Bias wise, it would be above it, but I think, this is okay. I'm really struggling with this. Bias wise, I probably would put it above Deepstone. In fact, I'd probably put it here if I was being biased, but trying to, again, like I've said, strip myself of that bias, I think it's just behind Deepstone, but I do think it's very close. Even though, again, it is kind of a snooze fest, it's not in Destiny 2 terms, especially recent Destiny 2 terms, it is kind of a glorified strike, but I still absolutely love it. And I actually want to say this here, I think it is a crime that Atheon never made it into either of the Pantheons, with Atheon being the very first final raid boss we ever got. I wish they would have put that in a Pantheon and remixed it somehow. I think that would have been really cool, but I like where Vault of Glass is right now. I think that's very deserving of it. All right, next one we got is the Grasp of Avarice dungeon. Now, Grasp of Avarice is, I'm gonna be honest, I think a little overhyped. I think it preys way too much on nostalgia without being a really high quality dungeon. And that's just me personally saying that. Like most of the encounters I get pretty bored of. Plus the solo flawless of this thing is, honestly, it might be the easiest solo flawless. I think I did it on my second try and I wasn't even trying to. I was just doing it for fun, solo, not even going for it. And I ended up getting it. Like that's how easy it was. The weapons of this dungeon are pretty cool, that because they're very nostalgic, being that of D1 legendary weapons, plus the raid exotic being Galahorn. Like the loot pool from this dungeon is very cool, but it is just very nostalgia bait. Even though I know it's nostalgia bait, that I still loved when I got a 1,000-yard stare. I still loved when I got a Matador or an IS Luna, and seeing Galahorn again in Destiny 2, especially back then when it was actually good, not just a support weapon, was also really cool. But I don't know what it is. I think the final boss of this dungeon is kind of a snooze fest. The ogre's pretty cool. The opening encounter being the loot cave, also another callback to D1, wasn't bad either. The sparrow part is actually really fun. I do love that sparrow part, but the thing that honestly it's painful to play through is the servitor encounter. I don't know who thought it was a good idea to make that take 4 bombs, but oh my gosh, that is one of the only encounters I truly think it's painful having to get through it, because it's not even hard, it's just long and boring. And I hate it so much. And I know a lot of people love this dungeon. I got friends that this is their favorite dungeon. And even though I'm gonna be honest, I am a nostalgic whore. I love nostalgia, and D1 is probably my favorite game of all time. Like, I like it over Destiny 2 purely because of nostalgia. Even with all that said, I don't love this dungeon that much. I really don't. I don't really like playing it that much. So for me, I'm gonna put it there. I think it is middle of the pack, C tier. And I know a lot of people are gonna be upset that I put it behind Garden of Salvation, but it is what it is. This is my list. I don't love Grasp of Avarice that much. The Soul of Flawless isn't even challenging. Like, it's just not my favorite. And I do like it probably over Crown of Sorrow. I would say I'd probably put it over Crown of Sorrow, but I would not put it above anything else we have ranked above it right now. All right, next one we got Vow of the Disciple. This is the Witch Queen raid, and this raid, I'm gonna be honest, I really hate it. I really don't like the... No, I'm sorry. I can't. I hope no one clicked off this video when I did that. That was a joke. This is going top of S as for right now, if I can put it there. This raid is phenomenal. And up until this point, Vow of the Disciple was my favorite raid experience I'd ever had. Every encounter I love. The only negative I can think of when it comes to Vow of the Disciple is that beginning traversal part can kind of take a while and it's a bit of a snooze fest. But once you get going, oh, it is so much fun. The totem encounter is really fun. I understand if you're just defending the totems, they can kind of be boring. Like, I understand if your job is just to defend that stupid pillar, it's kind of boring. But what I usually do is I'm running, and running is super fun, and I love it. Then you get to Caretaker, and Caretaker is another one of those where it's just super fun. Whether you're stunning the boss or running, it's really fun. And even though you usually have 2 guys ad clearing for that encounter, you can kind of intertwine and have people take different roles and have people flex when you need them to. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to Caretaker, in my opinion at least. But then after Caretaker, and this one might get me in some heat, but you have... I'm blanking on the name. I think it's called Exhibition, but it's the one with all the relics. And that encounter is just so damn fun. I don't know what it is, but it's just incredibly fun to run through. And with my team, the way we do it is we are just constantly all screaming at each other the entire time while the timer's counting down. And it makes it way more interesting. And I think it's so fun just how chaotic and chaos mode you can go with that encounter. And it would have probably been my favorite encounter in that entire raid, even though it doesn't have a boss, until you get to the next encounter, that being Rolk. And I think Rolk is one of the funnest raid bosses ever designed. The way you get to damage phase is fun. The fact that when you finally get up to where you damage him, you still have more mechanics to do before he's actually damageable. And he's one of the very first raid bosses that would actually come at you during damage phase and make you have to move and run around. You couldn't just perch yourself in a well and just shoot the boss from safety, because he would constantly be chasing you and kicking you. Like, from top to bottom, Vow of the Disciple is an incredible raid and is one of my absolute favorite raids ever made, period, end of discussion. The loot pool too is insane. Like, does anyone remember Forbearance and the absolute run that weapon had? Because for a long time, that was the only gun everyone ever used in PvE forever. And you also had Submission and Cataclysmic being also the linear everyone always used for a long time. The weapons were so damn good. And even though the raid exotic is kind of mid and it's only kind of good on a Gerfalcon Hunter build, it is still a really fun and unique exotic weapon. And I absolutely adore Vow of the Disciple. I think it is one of the best raid experiences Destiny has ever provided, and I am so happy I've been able to do it. Next up, we got Duality. This dungeon is another one of those dungeons that I think is so well done. I absolutely love this dungeon, and especially the aesthetic of this dungeon. This dungeon with the red nightmare realm, oh, it is so good. And that nightmare realm being on the weapons as well is absolutely incredible. And speaking of those weapons are phenomenal. Storm Chaser was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was the very first 3-round burst heavy linear we ever got. Unforgiven was an incredibly fun Void SMG, even though you kind of needed to have Frenzy on it to make it feel good because the handling and reload speed was really slow. It was still a really, really fun SMG. And you had that GL, which I think was called Lingering Dread. I could be wrong on that. I don't fully remember, but it was like the only disorienting grenade launcher that could also get chill clip. Like the weapons, hands down the best. The armor set, kind of a letdown. It was just like Hawkeye armor or whatever. So the armor set was not cool. But then you get to the encounters and the mechanics with the bells, and I think they are just absolutely phenomenal. I don't know what it is about this dungeon, but that high tense pressure of always having a timer anytime you enter the Nightmare Realm is incredible. Plus the sound design of the bells, the noises you hear once you're in the Nightmare Realm, it is just so good. The solo flawless experience on this also was one of my absolute favorites. I loved solo flawlessing this dungeon. And there's only really one encounter that I don't love, and that's the vault encounter, the middle encounter. And that's purely because doing it solo can kind of take a while. But if you have a full 3-stack in there, that encounter really goes by pretty quickly and it's not that bad. And then Kaido being the final boss also, I love the way that fight is designed, where you have 3 plates, you stun her with the bells, and then you just go to town. It is so well crafted, and I don't know what it is. I just love this dungeon, especially the first encounter being the Nightmare of Galron. I love the way that encounter works as well. Also really like that you can choose to play it really safe and leave that damage phase with like 10 seconds left, or you could play how I like to play and do as much damage as you possibly can and try to get out with like 1 second left. It's just from top to bottom, I think this is such a well-crafted dungeon. And for me personally, I'd put it middle of A tier. I would put it above Deepstone and the rest of A tier, but I would keep it behind Kingsfall and Leviathan. I just think Duality is one of those dungeons that is just so peak, and it's a dungeon that if anyone ever asked me to run it, I would always probably say yes, because I genuinely love that dungeon. But now we get to the updated version of Kingsfall in Destiny 2, and for me, this is my personal favorite raid ever, and it's top of S tier. I think this is the best raid ever made, because when the Taken King came out back in D1, I thought Kingsfall was the best raid ever until Wrath of the Machine. And the only reason I put Wrath of the Machine above it is because there was things about Kingsfall I didn't love, and I kind of touched on that earlier with that being the bombs hurting Oryx and not actually you. And there were some other things about D1 Kingsfall that wasn't my favorite, but the D2 version absolutely took everything that I just kind of was like, oh, I don't love that, or that could be better, and just made it so much better. The bombs now stun Oryx. Depending on how many bombs you got to stun him is how long your damage phase is. They also reworked totems, where now it's based off how many kills you get. So the more kills you get, the faster you can kind of progress through that encounter. And War Priest is also more demanding in Destiny 2, and it's a lot more mechanic heavy during War Priest, and I love that. And they did change some things with Golgoroth and the daughters and the way the plate mechanics works in the final encounter room. But the D2 version is perfect. And honestly, if the D2 version never came out, I probably would have put it in S tier along with these other 3. But because the Destiny 2 version exists and just made everything so much better from the D1 version, I genuinely don't think there's a better raid, in my opinion. I love Kingsfall that much. I think it is a perfect raid, from aesthetic to the weapons to the exotic to the encounters to the armor. Like, everything is just so peak when it comes to Kingsfall and Destiny 2, and is my personal favorite. Now we got another dungeon. We got Spire of the Watcher. Now, Spire of the Watcher is one of those dungeons that at the time when it came out, I actually really hated it. And I hated it mainly because of how simplistic and boring the encounters were. It was basically just connect the dots for every encounter. Like, the very intro of the dungeon has you connect the dots to go down the elevator. Then the technically very first encounter is you just basically connect the dots and ascend the spire. Then you get to the very top, and again, it's just connect the dots, but this time you have a reused asset in the consecrated mind from Garden of Salvation, so it's not even a unique boss. It's just more connect the dots. And then once you get past that, you traverse down till you get to the Wyvern, and then what do you do in that encounter is, again, you just connect the dots, but this time you have to make sure he's in a specific room before you connect the last set. Like, it's so boring, and it's boring not in a good way, it's boring in a brain dead way, and I just never really enjoyed, and I honestly still don't enjoy doing this dungeon. The one saving grace from this dungeon is the armor is pretty freaking cool, being cowboy armor, and there are some cool weapons, even though they're not really that good, they at least look cool. But for me, I would put it bottom of D tier when it came to dungeons. This is another one I have no clue how people feel about it, because I got some of my friends love this dungeon, some of my other friends hate this dungeon like I do, so I have no clue where people stand when it comes to Spire. But the weapons are kind of mid, the armor set's cool, the aesthetic is just kind of okay, hierarchy of needs, the exotic is pretty cool, I guess. The solo flawless experience is not great, it's kind of boring. The only time it really gets interesting is the final fight, because that chicken can be pretty lethal, and the supplicants on top of that while you're trying to connect the dots can kind of pose a challenge, but even then it's still pretty boring. So I think bottom of D tier is where it deserves, because I definitely do like it more than Pit of Heresy, but I like everything else more that's above it. Now we get to Root of Nightmares. Now, my opinion on this raid has changed over time, because initially when this came out with Lightfall, I would have put it probably right there. I really hated this raid because, again, it didn't feel like a raid. It was just kind of more of Spire, where it was just connect the dots. Like, that's basically like 3 out of the 4 encounters is just connecting the damn dots. It's so boring, and I just don't like it. Like, my favorite part, and I say this to my friends all the time, the only thing I liked about Ron was the fact that I could either shatter skate or well skate through the majority of it. That was like one of the only 2 saving graces it had, in my opinion. The other one being Planets, which Planets is actually a really solid encounter, but the only reason it's an actually solid encounter is because it's the only raid encounter in that damn raid. Everything else is just a glorified strike. But my opinion has changed on it over time, but not by much. It's still pretty ass, and I just put it probably just barely above Spire. I really don't like it. I think most of the weapons from here are pretty mid too. Acacia's, the trace rifle, Acacia's Dejection, I think is what it's called. That's actually pretty solid. I really enjoyed that when it came out, especially back then when double special was like really prevalent. But for me personally, every other weapon from that raid I just didn't love, and especially the armor. I thought the armor is really bad. I really do not like that armor. I'm sorry. If you like the way that armor looks, it's not for me. 2 other bright points from this raid though that I do genuinely think are standouts is, 1, Conditional Finality is an incredible exotic and one of my personal favorites again, and the aesthetic of this raid is top notch. Like, the raid looks very, very cool. It just is so sad to me that the mechanics are so boring and brain dead, and it's not that fun to run. So for me, it is towards the bottom of D tier. I would have put it F, but my opinion has kind of lessened over time, especially because I just barely did a run of it like a week ago, and I didn't mind my time doing it. I still didn't love it, but I didn't mind my time doing it. All right, next one we got is Ghost of the Deep. This is a dungeon that is going to be an incredibly hot take for me, because I do know how the community feels about this dungeon, and I know that they absolutely hate it, but for me, this is my personal favorite dungeon, and it is going in S tier. I'm just gonna kind of step away and let you guys process that. I'm gonna go get a drink. I'll be back. All right, how we doing? You guys doing okay? I know this is probably gonna upset a lot of you, but I genuinely love Ghost of the Deep. I think it is one of the best dungeons ever made, and I will not be told otherwise. The only part of this dungeon you can genuinely make an argument against being not great is the very first encounter being too long, which I absolutely agree with you. It is way too long. I think Rite of the Nine really solved that, making it only 3 dunks instead of 4. But even then, if you have fast movement and you can kind of slay out really quickly, you can make that 4 dunks go very, very quickly. Now, another complaint I see from people is the traversal time is just way too long in between encounters, which I do kind of agree with, especially how long the traversal takes in between the first and second encounter. It is pretty long, but again, once you get familiar with it and you learn some shortcuts, you can kind of get through it pretty quick. And for me personally, I think the aesthetic of this dungeon is so damn cool. I don't even really mind doing the long traversal sections because I think it looks so amazing. Plus the sound design of this dungeon is incredible. Like in all 3 encounters, you're dunking something and it just sounds so amazing. Plus you have the underwater sections, which also make everything sound pretty cool. I will give you guys this though. Another thing I don't love is I don't love that the bosses have a shield. That is one thing I also don't love. But again, I think they also kind of make up for it by making the DPS sections have a long window for you to damage in. And let's be honest here, the shields do not take that much, especially if you have someone running Arbalest. They get popped instantly. And again, that was another thing Ride the Nine solved by making the shields go pretty much with just a primary weapon. You didn't have to use anything spectacular to get the shields off. The one thing I love about this dungeon is based off your skill level and how well you remember where things are located, you can make this dungeon go as fast or take as long as you want. Because the second encounter, like if you go kill the knights immediately, kill the ogre, look at the symbols, if you know where those symbols are, you can hit them all really quickly, get out, kill the witches, start damage immediately. And then for the final, same thing again. Once you kind of get a hang of it, you can really start moving through it and go as fast as you can to make it go even quicker. And another thing from this dungeon I absolutely loved was the lore. Like the fact that it tied into my favorite raid of all time being King's Fall, where once you kill Oryx, Oryx is just floating away in space. Where did he land? Well, he landed on Titan. And that's where you go, and you get there and you learn that the Lucent Hive trying to resurrect Oryx with the light, and you have to stop them. I think it is so cool, especially the fact that the final encounter you're damaging from Oryx's dead corpse. Like, I don't know what it is. That's just cool to me. And another thing I absolutely loved from this dungeon was the solo flawless experience, which I did it the weekend this dungeon came out. And I remember everyone's complaints back then saying how long the damage phases took and how much health they had, and people were really complaining about that back then. But to me, that just made it a bigger challenge, because not only did you have to deal with the more heavier mechanics when it came to dungeons in Ghost of the Deep, but you also had to deal with the moths, and you had to deal with the ad density, and then you also had to deal with the health pool being really big. But again, where dungeons are different from raids is they don't have enraged where you have to kill the boss within a certain amount of time. So it's really up to you how well you're able to frag out and how quickly you can kill those dungeon bosses. And while I do see what people's criticisms of Ghost of the Deep are, I will never understand why people hate it the way they do, because in my opinion it is the best Destiny dungeon ever made, and it is by far an S tier. I wouldn't put it above these raids that I have placed above it right now, but it is very deserving of S tier, no question in my mind. Now we got Crota's End, the Destiny 2 version of Crota's End, and this is probably the biggest surprise to me, especially coming from what Crota's End was in D1, because I think with a lot of the community who played D1 and played Crota's End back in the day, we didn't know how they do it to make it actually be challenging. But then Crota's End came out, especially on contest mode on day one. That shit was not easy. It was hard. And the way they changed the way mechanics work and the way they changed pretty much every encounter in the entire raid, maybe the closest one being the bridge, was incredible. And they changed it for the better in so many ways, because now instead of killing Crota with a sword, you use that sword to bring Crota's shield down, and then you can damage him with whatever weapons you want. Now instead of the Death Singer's song before you damage Crota, where it's just you gotta kill the witches before they finish their song, it was now an actual boss, and it was actually a really well crafted boss, and they had new mechanics for it because there was really nothing there from the original Crota, so they were able to kind of have more free will and do some interesting stuff with it. And that's why we got the whole find the witches, kill them to start damage. And then even the beginning with the lanterns was so much better too, because now you have the swinging pillars in between the lanterns, and I don't know what it is, but I feel like the swinging pillars with the lantern section is the biggest nightmare for LFGs. I don't know what it is. Every time I LFG Destiny 2 Crota's End, I usually have a lot of people quitting during the freaking lantern phase because for whatever reason, they just cannot do it. I don't know why. It's really not that hard, but they just cannot do it. But the weapons from this raid are all incredible. Necrochasm coming back and actually being a really solid gun nowadays. Also awesome because I always wanted Necrochasm to be good in D1 and now it's good in D2. The armor being some of the best looking armor you can get in Destiny 2. I really love Destiny 2's Crota's End version. And to me, this is probably going to piss people off too. I'd put it right there in S tier, right above Last Wish. I'm pretty confident that's going to piss a lot of people off, but I don't know what it is. And it might just be like nostalgia. It might be the aesthetic, but they basically took everything that was good about Crota's End in D1, kept it, and then everything else that was so bad in Crota's End D1 and cranked it up to 11. And they made it one of the best raids, in my opinion, ever. Like, I think Crota's End is so fun to run. It's one of those raids I just don't get tired of running, and I'll always run it. Plus, I think it was kind of funny how they made the chalice work in this version of Crota's End, basically making it so it was impossible for the entire raid to be soloed. I think that was pretty funny because everyone kept saying like, oh, well, I wonder when the first solo for Crota's End in Destiny 2 is going to come. And Bungie put a mechanic in that made it so you could not do that for at least the entire raid. I think that's so funny. Now we got another dungeon. We got Warlord's Ruin. Now this dungeon is really cool in my opinion because it's like set in a medieval castle on top of a snowy mountain. Like, it is, aesthetically speaking, so damn cool. I do like that it was also pretty Scorn heavy, mixed with some Taken in there, but it was pretty Scorn heavy because we never, since Forsaken, we don't really get much with the Scorn nowadays. So I was pretty excited that the Scorn was a part of this dungeon. And before we get to the encounters and mechanics, I just first want to touch on the loot. The loot from this dungeon, while not spectacular, it did have one weapon from it that was absolutely insane, and that was Indebted Kindness, the very first rocket sidearm. And at the time when they announced what rocket sidearms were, no one really had any idea how good they were going to be. And then Indebted Kindness came, and holy crap, that gun is so damn good, and I loved using it during this time period. The armor set's pretty cool too. It's kind of like a snowy mountain climber looking aesthetic. I do like that. But now let's get to the mechanics. So Warlord's Ruin was the first dungeon that every encounter had a boss, which I actually really enjoyed. And I just realized something I didn't really get to mention, where I would put all the Ride of the Nine versions of the dungeons. Real quick, Ghost of the Deep would stay where it's at. Spire of the Watcher would stay where it's at. That's part of the reason why I didn't want to include the Ride of the Nine in this list. Anyway, sorry. Warlord's Ruin had 3 bosses, and even though the first encounter, the very first boss, is incredibly simplistic and not hard to do, because all you have to do is shoot the eyes once he teleports you into the cage, stand the totems he spawns, and that's it. That's literally the entire encounter. I still would rather have that more often than just a simple puzzle, because I traditionally like bosses more than heavy puzzle mechanic encounters. And obviously there are caveats for that. There are some more heavy mechanic I genuinely love and I would put above a lot of boss encounters, but more often than not, I'd rather have a boss. And that's what Warlord's Ruin did with the very first boss. And then you had the traversal section, which was also really fun with the booby traps and spikes and the aesthetic of being in a like medieval crypt or medieval dungeon, whatever you want to call it. Just so fun. Also forgot to mention the prison after you defeat the very first boss, where you're stuck in a jail cell and you have to figure out a way to bust yourself out. That was also really fun. The middle encounter, the ogre, I actually really enjoy. I like how you have to move from pillar to pillar during the damage phase. I like that he makes the entire top of the mountain have like a snowstorm where you have to hide next to fire to keep warm so you don't die. I think that's also really unique. My only issue with that encounter is that it can be really annoying, especially if you're playing like Warlock or something, where if you jump in the air and he he locks onto you, he can just beam your ass straight off the cliff. That is pretty annoying, but overall I do like that encounter as well. And the final encounter with the stupid meatball thing, also really fun. I thought it was really unique how you go from platform to platform, going up and up until you get to like the very top, where damage works differently, where you basically can just sit up there, damage the boss, and then move to the next plate, damage the boss, move to the next plate, damage the boss, which is different how it works from every other section when you're rising all the way up, where you have to kill the big scorn bosses and you have to stand the pillars to get the certain amount of damage. And again, this is one of the very few dungeon bosses that has a last stand, and once you activate it, you get teleported and you have to stay up there and kill him. I think that boss is so well designed and I really enjoy it. Plus the solo flawless of this dungeon is incredibly fun, and that final boss can be a little tricky depending on what class you run, because I did mine on Arc Hunter, which was a little tricky back in the day when this came out, especially with that final boss. But such a well-crafted dungeon, in my opinion, is the second best dungeon in this entire game, and I'd put it right below Go So Deep in S tier, because Warlord's Ruin is absolutely incredible, and I think most people would say it's the best dungeon in Destiny 2. And if you put it as your number one, completely valid, and I understand why. You know, so easy S for me. All right, now we got the very first Pantheon. Now, a little story with this version of Pantheon is I never got to do it from Riven upwards, because the week Riven was coming out, I actually went out of town for 17 days. So I basically missed Riven upwards and even the beginning of the final shape because I was out of town. So I never got to really finish it. But I believe the boss you fought before Riven was Rolk. So I did everything up to Rolk and it was awesome. I thought having 2 Rolks was really, really fun. It was really challenging too. And, you know, I didn't know what to expect when they announced Pantheon. I was kind of like, it's just raid bosses that we've already fought. Like, I didn't really get the appeal until I played it and I was like, oh, it's a raid boss rush mode with remixed encounters. This is awesome. And I thought it was so well done. I really, really enjoyed it. The weapons were all really cool from what you can earn from it too. You got the title, which I never got to get because I was out of town, but you got the title Godslayer, which might be the coolest fucking title in this entire game. And for me, I don't think I could ever put any version of Pantheon in S tier, because it's just taking raid encounters from other raids and putting them all into one kind of playlist. But that doesn't detract from it too much to the point where I'd put it that low. And I think this is an easy A for me, and I'd put it right ahead of Leviathan, just behind D1 King's Fall. Because from what my friends said, having to do Riven onwards, they said it was really fun. So I'm really disappointed I didn't get to finish it, but from what I did play, absolutely incredible. Now we got another controversial one, I think, Salvation's Edge, the final shape raid. And I think a lot of people don't like this raid, mainly because of Verity, which I might ruffle some feathers here. I actually kind of like Verity. I know it's very buggy, and believe me, I hate when it bugs. It can be really annoying, especially if you're on the 3rd wave and you're about to get out. But I think it is such a unique encounter where it incorporates you being killed, it incorporates your ghost shell, it incorporates your fashion of your guardian. It requires a lot of communication and comms. Like, I absolutely love Verity. I think it is one of the best mechanical encounters we've ever gotten. And, you know, I'll be honest, first encounter of this raid isn't my favorite. I think it kind of is a little boring and takes too long. The second encounter, though, that boss fight is really fun and it's really well crafted. I actually really love the way that boss fight works. Plus the mechanic of having to bounce between the plates back and forth, I actually don't mind the way that works as well. The third encounter, I think, is my personal least favorite, where you're having to go from room to room and there's like 3 total rooms and you're bouncing back and forth between your partner to collect shapes, close the pillars, go forward. That, I think, is my least favorite encounter, but more because I think it just takes too long, kind of like the first encounter of this raid. But again, I don't mind it that much. Then you get to Verity, which again, I already said I love Verity. I actually really like the way Verity plays. And then you get to the Witness. And this might be controversial, I don't know, but the Witness, in my opinion, is my personal favorite encounter in any raid or any dungeon. I absolutely love the Witness. I love the way running works. We're having to shoot the buttons, and I like that you can really, like, if you get good enough, you can be really quick with it. I think the ad density is perfect. It's not too hectic, but it's to the point where you definitely need to have people on ad clear or else it's going to get way too crazy. Plus, the damage phase is the main reason why this is my favorite encounter in any raid ever, because during damage, you have to constantly be moving because he's going to send out attacks that have pattern recognition that if you don't dodge it, you're going to die. Doesn't matter if you have a well, doesn't matter if you have a Titan bubble, you will die if you do not move and dodge it. So it really creates this skill gap where if you can memorize the patterns and you understand like kind of what he's going to do based off the first attack he does and the sound cues as well, you can get to a point where you can constantly be damaging while moving, and it allows for way better gameplay than most raid bosses provide. Not to mention as well is because he's designed kind of like Oryx is, where he's far away and he has a big crit spot on his chest, it allows you to absolutely frag out. You can really crank your damage on the Witness. Like, there's a reason why people can solo him, is because if you get good enough, there's so many methods to really crank damage on the Witness, whether that be a still hunt with a rocket rotation or a lucky pant rotation, at least lucky pants before they got nerfed, with the bolt action sniper from Renegade, or even back when the very first solo of Witness was using edge transit from Onslaught. Like, there's a lot of methods used to cook the Witness because the Witness was designed in a way where if you got enough practice and enough time with it, you could really show off your skill with it. And that's something I always loved. I know when it came to the day one, a lot of people didn't love it, especially Verity, because it took people a very long time with Verity. I know there's a lot of people complaining that you needed to have like a ton of hunters to even be able to clear the Witness on contest. To me though, I still think Salvation's Edge is a fantastic raid, and for me personally, I think I'm debating. I'd either put it behind Last Wish or I'd put it ahead of Last Wish. It's definitely S tier for me, but I'm just kind of trying to decide where I'd put it. I think for me and my list personally, and what I enjoy doing, I would put it ahead of Last Wish. I just don't really do Last Wish that much anymore. A lot of my friends don't really like running that raid as much also, and we all really like running Salvation's Edge, and we still do that, so then maybe that's playing into it. But for my list and me personally, I would put Salvation's Edge ahead of Last Wish. I think it is a fantastic raid, definitely deserving of S tier. Definitely not the best raid ever, but it's in that upper echelon for me. Okay, now we got another dungeon. We got Vesper's Host, basically Deepstone Crypt, but in a dungeon form. This is one of the dungeons I also really love. The aesthetic of this dungeon is phenomenal. The loot from this dungeon is also phenomenal, because you had that Void GL, the area denial frame that had attrition orbs and also can get repulsor brace and destabilizing rounds, and is one of my most used guns, honestly. And you also had one of the best DPS GLs in the entire game, and that was the GL Chill Inhibitor, which could run Envious Arsenal with bait and switch at a time where rapid fire GLs were absolutely insane. I know some people like that arc auto too. I personally don't love it because I think it just takes up too much space on my screen. That's like the reason I don't like it. It's kind of stupid, I know, but it is something that bothers me. But overall, the loot from Vesper's Host, solid. Plus, you got the return of Icebreaker from D1, and it is working differently now, but it's cool to still have it back. And the encounters I actually really enjoyed, even though it is kind of just copy and paste mechanics from Deepstone Crypt. It's done in a different way that doesn't make it feel too samey, because the very first encounter is finding what the correct panels are, dunking the nukes, killing the brigs, and for first encounters it is pretty solid. And I guess technically Vesper's Host is another dungeon that has 3 bosses if you count that final brig as a boss. To me, it never really felt like a boss though, because it was just kind of like no damage phase, no setup to repeat damage phase. It was just spawn him and then kill him before the time runs out to be able to dunk the nuke. But then you had the meatball encounter, which I actually enjoy as well, because it finally gives me a reason to run heavy waveframe GLs, because that's the only time they've ever been somewhat viable in anything. And then we get to the final encounter, which the final encounter is just insane. Like it just cranks the difficulty up so much. Not so much on normal mode, but when doing this on contest mode, doing this with a solo flawless, which I do think this is the hardest solo flawless to get in the game, and it's not because of the first two encounters. I think the first two encounters are so easy, but that final encounter cranks everything up to 11 and makes a solo flawless so much more difficult. It made the contest mode so much more difficult, and even on master mode, you do have to at least give it some respect, or else you're not gonna have that much fun with it. So I do like the challenge of the final encounter. I do think for me it never got old or repetitive, and I don't mind running it, even though it is a bit more nuanced and takes longer to set up, and it's a bit more of a longer encounter and is not as maybe fun as some other dungeon encounters. I still really enjoy it. And for me, when it comes to Vesper's host, I'd probably put it top of B tier. I don't think I'd put it quite A. And the main reason for that is because it is just so copy and paste mechanics from Deepstone Crypt. Like I said, they do it in a different way to make it not feel as samey, but it is basically the same mechanics. And while I do like every encounter from Vesper's host, and I do think it is a very solid dungeon all around, for whatever reason, it just doesn't have that much replayability for me. I never really wanted to go back and keep replaying it just for fun. Even though I do like running it, it was just never one that I just wanted to keep running over and over and over again. And I think that's the only reason it's not pushing into A tier. But honestly, it's right there. It'd be bottom of A if it wasn't A. But I think for my list personally, I would put it top of B. All right, now we got Sundered Doctrine, another dungeon. And this is another one I don't know how the community feels on. I hate this dungeon. I do not like this dungeon. I like it maybe a tad bit more than Spire, but not by much. I absolutely hate this fucking dungeon. This is legit just snooze fest the dungeon. That first encounter is so damn boring and takes so damn long, to the point where I never want to run it. And anytime anyone asks me to do this dungeon, like, I always ask if they have a checkpoint for final boss or at least second, because I genuinely hate doing that first encounter so much. And not even because it's difficult, not because there is some tech with it where you can pre-read what the symbols are going to be based off your Destiny 2 lore knowledge. Like, I don't hate it for that. I just hate how long it takes and how boring it is. It's not fun. Like, it's not fun at all. It just takes too damn long to collect the lenses, figure out the symbols, line them all up, shoot the light onto them. And the fact that you have to do it one time, and then the next run you have to do it 2 times, and then the run after that you have to do it 3 times, making a grand total of 6 fucking times you have to do that stupid lens shit, is insane. The second encounter is a little bit more unique. I actually like it. Is go at your own pace. You have wills where you can set up to have really long damage phases by setting up kill in the first one, or you could do super short burst DPS phases, which is what I did for my solo flawless, which is where you set kill on the last one. Like, I like the freedom of it. I think it's really interesting having 4 Shriekers as a boss. So that encounter I don't actually mind. Then the last encounter kind of incorporates the first encounter and how long it can take with lining lenses up and lights, which I don't like that much at all. Plus, the last encounter is really easy and it doesn't really pose too much of a challenge or even a threat. It is another one of those absolute snooze fests to kind of just run through. So when it comes to the encounters and the mechanics, there's really only one that I like, and even then I don't love it that much. I think it's more unique and unlike anything else we've ever gotten, so that bumps it up, but it's still not one that I'm like, oh my gosh, that encounter is so much fun, I just want to keep playing it over and over again. I've never thought that about the Shriekers at all. And to me, this dungeon, I just don't like doing it at all. I think it's so boring. The aesthetic of this dungeon is okay. It's nothing crazy. It's just more of that pyramid kind of look. The traversal sections are also pretty fun, especially with that one part that's like Indiana Jones with the balls rolling. That was pretty cool. And by far and above, the saving grace of this dungeon is the loot. The weapons are absolutely insane, mainly because of the origin trait, because that origin trait is, for PvE purposes, might be the best origin trait they've ever made, where it basically gives every gun explosive payload against low tier enemies and then it exhausts high tier enemies. Like, it's insane. That Strand hand cannon is one of my most used hand cannons in Destiny 2. The Trace rifle is insane. The Scout rifle is also insane. And the Slug shotgun is one of the best damaging slugs in the entire game. I actually think it might be the best damaging slug in the game. I might be wrong on that. There might have been some new ones. I just don't fully remember. But at the time, it was the best damaging slug in the entire game. And then Finality's Augur is one of the best linear fingers in the game. It's also super unique and really cool the way you can kind of shoot a turret out. So when it comes to loot, top notch, but everything else in that dungeon I do not like at all. And the only reason it's better in Spire is purely because of the loot. That is the only reason. But now we get to the final Destiny 2 raid we will ever see, Desert Perpetual. Desert Perpetual, in my opinion, is incredible. I love this raid. It is one of the better raids I have ever played in the entire Destiny franchise. I love that it incorporates elements like Leviathan, where you can kind of choose what encounter you want to start with. Especially once you clear it, you can go straight to the final encounter to just try to farm the exotic Whirling Ovation, which, by the way, is super slept on. I actually really like Whirling Ovation, and I think it is pretty good. But every encounter in this entire raid is, in my opinion, phenomenal. The Wyvern encounter, where you have the jumping mechanic every like 4 ticks, and you have to have someone basically ascend to get the buff to start damage, but you have to also have people down below shooting the pillars at the exact same time so that the player who's ascending up can get all the way up. I think that encounter is super fun. The Hydra encounter also is incredible because it requires a lot of communication, especially if you are inside a room. Not to mention the damage phase, I actually really like with the Hydra because it's a long, drawn out damage phase where you also have to, it randomly selects people to go do mechanics to extend damage phase, and if you aren't able to do it, it cuts your damage short. Like that Hydra is probably my second favorite encounter in that entire raid. Then you have the Hobgoblin, which the Hobgoblin can kind of be a bit annoying because there are some times where he locks onto you even when you're not in his line of sight, and you get out of his line of sight, but he somehow is still locked onto you and just snipes you. That can kind of be annoying, but I love the way that mechanic works too, especially how to extend damage phase. And I guess that's the thing I like about a lot of these encounters is there's ways to extend damage, but they require you to do something extra and provide extra skill level, which is something I've always loved. And then when you get to the final encounter, which I think the final encounter of Desert Perpetual is my favorite encounter of that raid and is super well done. And I recently took a buddy through it for the first time, and even that final encounter, he really enjoyed it. And he's like, oh, I like the way this works. This feels good. I already kind of touched on Whirling Ovation. I think Whirling's a really cool exotic. The weapons set from this raid isn't crazy, but it's not bad. There are some standout weapons that are pretty solid. I really like the fusion rifle. I like the submachine gun. The sniper also can get really good rolls. The armor is pretty cool too. The aesthetic of this entire raid is also super solid. And I think for me, I don't think it quite cracks S tier, but I do think it is top of A tier, right ahead of D1 King's Fall. I genuinely really love Desert Perpetual. I think it is a phenomenal raid. I know the epic version of the raid isn't on here, but I probably just put it right above the base version because the epic raid is pretty cool, especially with the final encounter, the updated loot with more weapons, getting the catalyst for Whirling Ovation, and basically being how whatever order you do the raid in affects the mechanics going into the next encounter. Super, super creative. I love the way that played out. And I know it's not on this list, but just imagine that the epic version of DP would just be right ahead of this one. Still probably an A tier, not quite cracking S, but still super solid. Now we got the final dungeon in Destiny 2. Equilibrium came out with Renegades, the Star Wars dungeon. Now this dungeon is really solid. However, I have done it a lot recently because I've had friends who have been wanting to run it over and over again, and it has kind of gotten played out for me. But at the same time, the Star Wars aesthetic of this dungeon is super cool. I'm a Star Wars fanatic. I love Star Wars, not the new Star Wars, the George Lucas Star Wars. Let's get that established first things first. But the Star Wars aesthetic with the sounds also super well done. The weapon set all being kind of Star Wars weapons, also really awesome. The auto rifle from this dungeon is one of my most used guns because it's a heat weapon with heal clip incandescent, so you can basically proc heal clip so damn quickly, and it's one of my most used guns, and it's been one of my most used guns ever since this dungeon came out. The sniper rifle being the best in-class sniper rifle for damage. Also the pulse rifle not only being really good in PvE but also really good in PvP. And there's some other weapons from here like the sword or the scout, which are solid but in my opinion aren't as good as the ones I mentioned already. The exotic from this dungeon also is super underrated. It hits like a truck. I think it's awesome. It's like Chewbacca's bow rifle. But now let's talk about the mechanics and the encounters. The first encounter, I don't mind at all. I think it's pretty cool that you have like a racetrack around the encounter where you have to go to collect the pools to take the red guys' shields off so you can spawn the AT-ATs to kill them. Kind of a basic first encounter, but solid nonetheless. I don't really get tired of running it because it can go pretty quickly depending on your skill level, and it is kind of simplistic in a good way like we've talked about earlier. The second encounter, the middle encounter, is also really well, and honestly might be one of the coolest boss entrances we have. The way he kind of takes both lightsabers and the lights go dark. And that encounter, you have to basically do the same thing you did in the first, where you collect the taken essences dropped by scions, go into 3 separate rooms, and use the special grenade to shoot buttons to lock out all 3 rooms, to go back into the middle to then start damage by dropping him in a pit or having him smack a generator. I don't mind that encounter at all. I actually think it's pretty fun. Then the last encounter, you have the big ass Warlock, which is pretty cool, honestly, which kind of functions the same way, but implements the first and second encounter into kind of one with some new elements with the shadows, where you can either compel them or kill them, depending on how long or how much damage you want to try to put out during the damage phase. Overall, it's a really, really solid dungeon. I think I do have a bias against it right now because of how much I've ran it recently, but I still think it is an incredible dungeon, and I'd probably put it bottom of A tier, above Vesper's Host, but right behind Prophecy. If you were asking me to be as unbiased as I can possibly be, it would probably be right above Prophecy, but again, for my list, I would put it personally below it, but it still is an A tier dungeon, and it is by far one of the better dungeons we have in this game. Oh, all right, but now we have the final ranking, Pantheon 2.0, the final raid anything we will ever have ever again. And Pantheon 2.0 is pretty solid. I genuinely like how they brought back a lot of the old raids. Basically every old raid they sunset out of the game was brought back with the final encounter, all except Spire of Stars, and they didn't really change too much about the original versions, so they're basically one-to-one copies. So if you wanted to go back and kind of relive the glory days with those final encounters, you can. And then the remixed versions too are all pretty solid. I really like War Priest. I think they did a really cool job with War Priest, incorporating the totems mechanic too. And that's another thing I do want to mention is basically the way they remixed the current Destiny 2 encounters is by combining multiple encounters into one from the same raid. I think that's a really unique and cool way to do things. Consecrated Mind from Garden, I don't love how long it can take to get to damage phase, but that's another one that I genuinely like how mechanic heavy it is while also having a boss to deal with on top of it. I do like that synergy of that. Morgus, another one, incorporating elements from Queen's Walk into it, especially the final stand of Morgoth. I actually think it's really fun having to traverse through the floating debris as fast as you can before his bar fills up too quickly, so you can still have time to damage him. I think that was really well done. And overall, Pantheon 2.0 is super solid, but I don't think it's as good as Pantheon 1.0. I do wish we would have gotten Spire of Stars back, at least the final encounter from Spire of Stars, and I do think they missed the boat on some of the encounters they chose to remix and put into Pantheon 2.0 from the current Destiny loot pool. Like, I think Witness should have definitely been in there. I think Atheon should have been in there. I think it would have been cool to see the very first final raid boss and the Witness being the conclusion to the 10-year saga in the same Pantheon and have them both be remixed. I think that would have been really cool. So I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity. And overall, I don't think Pantheon 2.0 reaches A tier for me. I think it is definitely top of B though. Definitely top of B, teetering on A, but ultimately there's just some things about Pantheon 2.0 I wish was different, and it just doesn't have that sauce that Pantheon 1.0 had. So for me, I think that drops it just one tier down. Still top of B though, still super solid, just not quite as good as the first iteration of it. But there you guys have it. That is my complete and final Destiny 2 raid and dungeon tier list. I'm looking over at my recording right now, and I have been rambling for quite a long time. So if you stuck it out all the way till the very end of this video, just know I really appreciate that. And now with Destiny kind of being over, seemingly for good, I want to know what your guys' favorite raid or dungeon is down in those comments below. And also tell me what I got wrong. If you really disagree with an opinion I had based off my list, let me know in those comments below. I will be trying to read most of them and trying to respond as many as I can. But yeah, guys, just want to end it with thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later.